Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. During the winter in Vermont, it's not uncommon to see cows outside in the pasture. Some farmers use winter grazing practices, and that can prompt questions about whether the cows can withstand cold temperatures and snow. Well, today we're going to learn about winter grazing and how farmers determine whether their animals should be outside. To begin, I'm joined by Jenn Colby. Jenn is the Pasture Network Coordinator with University of Vermont Extension's Center for Sustainable Agriculture. Welcome.
Hey, Judy.
What does winter grazing actually mean?
So there's no standardized term for winter grazing. It's called a lot of different things. Sometimes there's something called bale grazing in the winter, where literally the cows or other animals are eating from a big round bale, or sometimes there's stockpiling of feed, which is closest to summertime grazing, where grass is left in the fall to grow up really tall, and then even when the snow comes, animals are still rotated around the pastures too. That's a little bit more what winter grazing would be.
And so a lot of people think that animals should be in the barn in the winter, that really if they can't see the food, that they shouldn't be outside.
Right, and so that's actually one of the challenges when folks drive by and they see animals outside in the winter. Is the perception may be that there isn't any food there because they see the snow and they don't see what's underneath it. But actually ruminant animals create a lot of heat themselves, and they can be quite healthy outside in the fresh air as well.
And so what about water?
So some animals still have access to water in the wintertime. They have a standard centralized watering system that is not able to freeze, which is good. And sometimes they eat snow. And research from especially Canada has shown that cows can be very healthy eating snow. It has to be the right kind of snow and in the right quantities, though. Which
means that this is something, situations out in the pasture have to constantly be monitored, I would think, because the situations are always changing.
Absolutely. Daily management is absolutely essential. So if you see the animals moving every day as a bystander or as a neighbor, then that's a helpful hint to know that the farmers are actively managing their animals.
Is this something that animals have to get used to, or are they naturally adapted to this kind of living?
Actually, it needs to be animals that are in really good condition to begin with. They have to be, healthy to start with. They have to have a good fat cover on them to be able to withstand changes in weather and temperature and conditions. That helps a lot. There's certainly animals that are not well adapted to this. It depends upon breed, and it may depend upon the stage in their life too.
Well, we're going to take a moment now to meet one Vermont farmer who uses winter grazing. Across the fences, Keith Silva has our story.
Come on, cows! Come on, cows, come on!
This is how Bruce Hennessy rings the dinner bell.
That seems to work out pretty well.
It's late November, and long after the last leaf has fallen and the growing season has gone by, Hennessy continues to graze his cattle on 30 acres along the Winooski River in Richmond.
The cereal rye and the ryegrass has come up in this late fall, early winter period for our winter grazing program. We're doing some experiments with how far we can go without feeding hay to our cows. And we've been down here now since mid-October, about when the perennial grasses have kind of stopped growing. As you can see, we've had a nice crop of ryegrass and rye that's really doing well with our cows.
Late season grasses aren't the only things that thrive in these cooler conditions.
These cows love being out, below freezing temperatures. They love being outside. They do extremely well. They develop extremely hardy winter coats. And they have a good heated water source and minerals, and a very closely sheltered area that they can get into when the wind gets whipping up and severe in here.
Winter grazing keeps animals on pasture longer, which in turn keeps more money in the farmer's pocket.
The more you can extend your grazing season, the more economical that'll be for your farm, and also the better it'll be for your cows, particularly cows you're trying to grow for meat production.
How many acres here, Bruce?
150.
150, and you rent 300 down in Richmond.
That's right.
Hennessy's home farm in Huntington brings to mind the old nursery rhyme about Old MacDonald. There are sheep, pigs, horses, chickens, and of course, cows.
We're a diversified farm, and what we try to do is have all the animals work together. They all fulfill a particular niche in our program. We'll have pigs in a certain area, and we definitely will graze through those areas, but then we'll put in cows, and then sheep will run behind them. And then after the cows and sheep have gone through, we'll bring chickens through, and they eat parasites, spread manures, spread out all sorts of different things, and actually cleanse the pasture pretty well.
Using animals instead of tractors and plows to work the land keeps Hennessy's fuel costs low, reduces erosion, and improves the health of the soil. Another innovation that Hennessy employs creates a kind of outdoor buffet line.
Well, we're seeing our brood cows up on the hill here. They are on hay right now. One of our methods on our steep ground here for actually distributing manure when we are feeding hay during the late fall and winter before they go inside is that we're taking our round bales and we're rolling them out in long strips. And we're trying to cover ground with that. And what that does is distributes manure all over the place rather than sitting a round bale down on the ground and having them all focus on a small circle. First of all, that gives every cow a place at the table. The other part of it is that this is pretty low-end hay. It's late first cut hay. It's something that you do see some waste out here, but we don't think of it as waste. We think of it as additional organic matter for the soil. And we've had great results with improving our fertility out here with that kind of program.
The practices of sustainable agriculture that are being used on this farm extend from Hennessy's own passion and philosophy.
Allowing the cows to do what they naturally want to do, go out and feed on the grasses that they've evolved to feed on, but also the thing I'm most passionate about is producing the healthiest possible food that you can produce.
Healthy food from healthy animals raised on healthy soil.
There is some potential just to let the grass grow then. Absolutely. Yeah, we love letting the grass grow. That's right.
Whatever the season. In Richmond, I'm Keith Silva with Across the Fence.
Well, thanks, Keith. Here in the studio, I'm with Jenn Colby of UVM Extension Center for Sustainable Agriculture, and joining us is Jim Welch. Dr. Welch is UVM Professor Emeritus of Animal and Food Sciences and raises beef cattle. Thanks so much for being with us. Now, Professor Welch, how do farmers decide whether the animals should be outside?
The first consideration is their maturity. That is, winter grazing through snow is only suitable for brood cows, as mature animals. It's not good for calves, it's not good for lactating animals, or any animal that has any sort of health problem.
So the animals have to be healthy and not producing milk to be at the top of their prime to do this.
Yeah, the normal annual cycle would be that they would be gestating during this period, ready to calve in the spring, and nutrient requirements during that period are less than the other periods of
And so
production.
what do they eat? What's there for these cows to eat?
The primary food material for beef production is forage, grasses and legumes, and that's what they're built for. That's what makes economic production.
So we're not looking at cows that are going to be taking trees down or eating shrubs or twigs?
If under snow grazing condition you see animals eating brush, anything like this, that means they're far too hungry and the hay needs to be introduced rapidly. These things aren't going well at all.
So there are lots of variables when it comes to winter grazing.
Incredible, yes. As it can change from day to day, like we get a thaw. The normal limitation is 10 inches of snow. Beyond that, that's too much work for them to graze through. But you get a thaw, get a nice crust, and there's too much work getting through the ice. And that can change overnight and whatnot. So it takes constant monitoring. Need to be able to judge the animal's gut fill, their behavior. If any animal looks cold, the system isn't working. As normally, as we said before, the winter environment is quite comfortable for mature beef cows, no problem.
How can you tell if an animal is stressed or cold?
The back will be humped up, the feet will get closer and closer together. They just look cold.
They look cold, rather than out normally grazing.
Yeah.
And so are there some classes of cattle that are better suited, or do they have to be trained to do this?
Training helps. As my particular herd, we get 3 inches of snow, no problem. Get 6 inches of snow, they'll meet me at the gate and bellow at me because they know that there's a hay storage over there. And I'll say, we'll look at it and scuff some and see how the available dry matter is. And I'll say, no, cows go back to work. And they'll say, basically, okay, we'll do it. But at some point, you have to feed hay. But to have cows that are accustomed to this process is a great help.
And as you said before, they're perfectly happy outside.
Yes, and perfectly healthy. That's as long as they can get out of the wind. It's a very logical environment for them.
And do cows need more food and water in the winter, I would think, because it's cold?
I'm sorry.
Do they need more food and water in the winter as opposed to?
Oh yeah, that's the only fuel that keeps them warm is food. And they have to continue what other metabolic processes they're doing, as in this case, gestation. And it takes more, yes.
And so, Jen, do the animals rotate through the small paddocks like they do in the summertime? I mean, we talked to this one farmer that we saw in the package, and he has lots of fields, and he rotates the animals through, but does that also happen in the wintertime?
So it depends upon the feed source that the farmer is using. If they're using a round bale situation where they set down a round bale, lots of times that's what's used in a barnyard setting, or the farmer may even set up wrapped round bales in strategic locations in paddocks to move the animals, largely to distribute their manure in those areas, or they may unroll them, as Bruce has done, or if they've planned it out and they plan to stockpile feed so that the animals will actively graze, they will move them into small paddocks as well. But the challenge of snow on top of that stockpile is you may not always know what's there, so that's when it's really helpful and useful to have extra feed available so that the cows can not only choose the stockpile, but they can also balance with stored feed as well.
Which is why, you mentioned earlier, this is a situation that has to be constantly monitored.
Absolutely.
So people don't farmers don't just turn animals out for the winter with a shed and say, see you in the spring.
Not if they'd like their animals to come back to them in the spring.
Is that what some people think, though?
It's a common perception that raising beef cattle is about as complicated as keeping a cat, and that's not true. That's not true. It takes constant surveillance, constant adjustment, because it's a complicated system.
Well, this is an investment for farmers, so they certainly want to make sure that their investment thrives and does well.
Yes, and animals that lose weight, it takes more feed to get them back to where they should be, and that's loss.
Absolutely. That may be the decision between giving them water or allowing them to eat snow if there's adequate snow there, because it takes so much more energy to convert snow to water and bring it up to body temperature that is energy that the animal's using to not gain weight. So that's a challenge. It's a management choice of the farmer himself.
And so I know that we talked earlier, and you said that you've heard from a lot of farmers that they get phone calls from concerned people who see the animals out in the wintertime, maybe a layer of snow on top of them, and think, oh, gee, these poor animals.
Yeah, we get some calls from farmers who are concerned about public perception that way, and I think that the majority of farmers that I talk to, they invite the public to come ask them questions and just better understand the situation, because it's very difficult when a consumer or a neighbor calls an authority and makes a complaint, because there's no opportunity for conversation. And I think the farmers would welcome the conversation, certainly over an uncomfortable or negative situation.
Because people probably have no idea what goes into the decisions to have the animals out there, and the fact that they're being monitored.
Also, a demonstration that the cows are indeed comfortable.
Absolutely.
And how would you do that, do you think?
Just simply go look at them.
Yeah.
Look at their behavior. Again, see if anybody looks cold. And under
so
normal conditions, they won't.
They'll just be going about their business, being cows and eating.
Yeah, if they're laying down, chewing, that means that they're ruminating, and they're very comfortable when they're laying down. So.
Now, Jen, if someone has a question, how can they get in touch with the Pasture Network?
So our website is www.uvm.edu/pasture, and they're welcome to give me a call at the number on the screen.
Maybe even questions about whether or not they want to winter pasture their own animals.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's not right for everyone. but it is right for many. So.
Okay. I want to thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you so much,
Good
Judy.
to be here.
That's our program for today. I'm Judy Simpson. We'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.
For a video copy of today's program, call toll-free 1-888-ATF-3430. Across the Fence is brought to you as a public service by University of Vermont Extension and WCAX-TV.